Imagine standing in front of your own house, your keys in your hand, your garage door lifting up, and out of nowhere, someone screams at you, accusing you of stealing the car that's sitting inside your garage. Not just accusing you, but calling 911 to report it as a crime. That's exactly what happened to one black man, Terrence Braxton. He was just going about his day, minding his business, when his neighbor, a woman tied to the HOA, decided that his very existence was suspicious. And here's the part that makes this story almost unbelievable. She claimed the car he was standing next to was hers. She said he stole it. She said she just bought it. And if you think that's wild, wait until you hear what went down when the police actually showed up. Because this wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a snapshot of how racial bias turns everyday life into a crime scene. This story isn't just about one argument between neighbors. It's not just about a car or a garage. This is about the deeper problem that so many black people in America live with every single day. The fear that something as simple as opening your garage, walking down the street, or playing outside could get you accused, harassed, or even worse. So today, we're going to break down the full story of what happened when this HOA, Karen, decided to call 911 on her black neighbor. We'll unpack what went down that day, why it's bigger than just one confrontation, and how it connects to a whole history of people weaponizing fear and police against black lives. And trust me, this isn't the only time something like this has happened. I'm going to share other cases that sound almost too ridiculous to be real, but they are. And once you put them side by side, you'll see the bigger picture. And by the end, I want you to answer this. Do you think the cop in this case handled it the right way, or did he go too far by even entertaining the neighbor's claims? Comment your thoughts. I want to hear them. So let's rewind and lay this out clearly. Terrence Braxton lived in a quiet neighborhood. Suburban, HOA managed, the kind of place where you'd expect peace and quiet. On this day, he pulled into his driveway, got out, and started opening his garage. Nothing unusual. But across the street, a neighbor was watching. And this wasn't just any neighbor. This was someone who carried herself with authority, like she was in charge of who belonged and who didn't. Instead of recognizing Terrence as the homeowner, she convinced herself, loudly, that he was a criminal stealing a car. She confronted him. She yelled that the car wasn't his. She even screamed that he stole the car she just bought. Then, without hesitation, she dialed 911. Now let that sink in for a second. A man is literally standing in his own driveway, entering his own garage, and a neighbor not only doesn't believe he belongs there, she tries to criminalize him for existing. This is the challenge that goes beyond one driveway. This is the struggle black people face every single day, having to prove that they belong in spaces they've worked for, lived in, and earned. Let's be real here. When a white neighbor calls 911 on a black man, it's not just reporting something. It's a loaded act. It's a dangerous act. Why? Because history shows us what those calls can lead to. Think about John Crawford III in Ohio. He was inside a Walmart holding a BB gun off the shelf, something the store was literally selling. Another customer called 911, claiming he was armed and dangerous. Within minutes, police stormed the store and shot him dead. Think about Christian Cooper in Central Park, a black man birdwatching. He asked a woman to put her dog on a leash, and instead of following the rules, she called 911 and told them an African-American man was threatening her. She weaponized her fear, knowing full well what kind of danger that could put him in. Or think about Tamir Rice, 12 years old, playing in a park with a toy gun. Someone called 911 saying he looked suspicious. Police pulled up and shot him within seconds. This is why stories like Terrence's aren't just annoying, they're dangerous. Because one false report, one exaggerated claim, can escalate into something life-changing or even life-ending. And here's what makes the HOA Karen story even more absurd. She didn't just say, "I don't recognize him." She didn't just say, "I'm worried." She said that the car inside his garage, the garage attached to his house, was hers. She claimed ownership over it. That's not confusion. That's entitlement. That's the mindset of someone who thinks they have the right to decide who belongs and who doesn't. So what happened when the police arrived? This is the part that could have gone very, very wrong. Police show up to a suspicious black man call all the time, and too often they come in hot, guns drawn, assumptions made, danger high. But in this case, Terrence kept his cool. He explained the situation. He showed that it was his house, his garage, his car. The officer checked the registration, matched the address, and confirmed the obvious. Terrence was the rightful owner. Now you'd think that would be the end of it. But the woman didn't back down. She kept arguing, kept insisting, kept making noise like her word carried more weight than the truth sitting right in front of her. And that's the most revealing part of the story. Even when the facts were undeniable, even when the cop told her she was wrong, she couldn't accept it. She had to keep pushing. This shows us something important. Bias doesn't disappear when the truth shows up. Entitlement doesn't shrink when proven wrong. People like this will keep twisting reality to fit their narrative. And that's the scariest part. Because if the officer had been less patient, or if Terrence had been more frustrated, this could have ended in tragedy. And if you think this story is just one random neighbor losing her mind, you're wrong. This is part of a much bigger pattern. Because just like Terrence, there have been dozens of black men and women accused, harassed, or even arrested for doing completely normal things. And if you think calling the cops on a man in his own garage is bad, wait until you hear about the black real estate agent who was showing a house when police showed up with guns drawn. Second key story, the real estate agent. Let's talk about Michigan. In 2021, a black real estate agent named Eric Brown was showing a home to a client. Totally normal. That's his job. But a neighbor looked across the street, saw two black men walking through the house, and immediately jumped to the worst conclusion. They called the cops and reported a burglary. The police didn't just knock on the door. They showed up with guns drawn. They ordered Eric and his client out of the house. They handcuffed them on the lawn. Imagine that humiliation. You're literally at work doing your job, and because of someone else's bias, you're suddenly a suspect. And your client, the person you're trying to serve, is standing there in cuffs right beside you. Now think about what that does to someone. Think about the fear, the trauma. Think about how dangerous that moment could have been if someone twitched the wrong way, said the wrong word, or moved too quickly. And just like with Terrence, once the truth came out, the officers had to admit their mistake. But the damage was already done. The humiliation, the trauma, the memory, that doesn't go away. And if that made your blood boil, get this. A 9-year-old black girl had the cops called on her for doing something her city literally encouraged, spraying bugs on the sidewalk. Third key story, the 9-year-old. Her name was Bobby Wilson. She was 9 years old in New Jersey, trying to help her neighborhood by spraying invasive lanternflies. The city had asked residents to help get rid of them. She was doing exactly what she was supposed to do. But a neighbor saw her and called 911. The dispatcher was told there was a suspicious little black woman outside. Not a child, not a girl, a suspicious black woman. When police arrived, Bobby had to deal with something no child should ever face, the weight of being criminalized just for existing. And here, where this story hits deep. Even as a kid, even while helping her neighborhood, she wasn't safe from suspicion. She wasn't allowed to just be a child. So now we've looked at a man in his garage, a real estate agent doing his job, and a little girl playing outside. Three completely different people, three completely normal situations, but all treated as suspicious. When you put those stories side by side, the pattern becomes crystal clear. So let's circle back to Terrence and his garage. He was in his driveway at his home next to his car, and instead of being treated like a neighbor, he was treated like a criminal. He had to prove himself in his own space. This is the deeper truth of what black people in America face every day, not because of anything they've done, but because of the way others choose to see them. It's the same story told over and over again in different ways. Suspicion first, proof later. Fear first, humanity later. And sometimes there's no chance for proof at all. So the question I leave you with is this. Do you think the officer in Terrence's case handled it the right way, or should he have shut the whole thing down the moment the neighbor's story fell apart? Comment your thoughts. I want to know what you think. If this opened your eyes, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next story. So in part 1, we left off with a question that's still hanging in the air. Did that officer do the right thing by calmly checking Terrence's paperwork and confirming the truth, or should he have immediately shut down that false accusation the second it left the neighbor's mouth? That's a question people are still debating. But here's the thing. You might think the story ended there, with Terrence proving himself in front of his own garage and the cops walking away. But what happened next? That's where the story really gets heavy. Because the truth is, that one phone call didn't just bring cops to Terrence's door for a few minutes. It changed how he looked at his entire neighborhood, his HOA, and even his own sense of safety in a place that was supposed to be his home. And if you thought part 1 made you angry, wait until you hear how this fallout unfolded. So picture this. The cop leaves. Terrence is left standing in his own driveway, frustrated but calm, trying to collect himself. The woman, Karen, is still across the street, muttering, still convinced she's right even after being proven wrong. You'd think that would be the end of it, but in neighborhoods like this, there's always an audience. Curtains twitch. Neighbors peek out. Some pretend they didn't see anything. Others whisper. And soon enough, the entire HOA community has a new piece of drama to chew on. Here's the painful part. Nobody came up to Terrence afterward to say, "Hey man, I saw what happened. I know that wasn't right. I'm sorry you had to deal with that." Nobody. Instead, the silence hit harder than the shouting, because silence in moments like that feels like agreement. This is something a lot of black people know too well. When you're targeted unfairly and the people around you just watch. They don't step in. They don't speak up. They just let it happen like your dignity is up for debate. A few weeks later, Terrence went to the next HOA meeting. He debated skipping it. After all, why sit in a room with people who probably sided with her? But something inside him told him to show up, to at least see if anyone would address what happened. The meeting starts. Usual stuff: trash pickup, lawn care rules, budgets. Then comes community concerns. And guess who stands up? Karen. She didn't apologize. She didn't admit her mistake. She doubled down. She told the room she had every right to call the police because suspicious activity was happening near her home. She framed herself as the hero, someone protecting the neighborhood. And the worst part, a couple of people nodded. Not everyone, but enough. Enough to let Terrence know that in their eyes, his existence still needed justification. Now imagine sitting there, hearing your neighbor tell an entire room full of people that she had a right to criminalize you. Imagine watching other people sit on their hands, not wanting to get involved. That's the kind of humiliation that doesn't fade quickly. After that, Terrence noticed the shift. Neighbors who used to wave stopped making eye contact. A few even crossed the street to avoid walking past his house. He started wondering, were they scared of him now? Did they believe her version of the story? Or were they just uncomfortable, too cowardly to admit what they'd seen? That's the part people don't talk about when they say, "Oh, at least you weren't arrested. At least it didn't end badly." Sure, it didn't end with handcuffs or worse, but it left scars. Because now every time Terrence pulled into his driveway, he felt eyes on him. Every time he opened his garage, he thought about that day. And let's be real here. That's how racial trauma works. It doesn't always come with bruises. Sometimes it comes with whispers, silence, stares, and the constant fear that the next call to 911 won't end so peacefully. Now let's zoom out for a second, because what happened to Terrence wasn't just one nosy neighbor with too much time on her hands. This connects to a much bigger pattern when it comes to HOAs and racial profiling. HOAs on paper are supposed to keep neighborhoods organized, but in reality, they often become breeding grounds for power trips. Rules about grass height, paint colors, and fence styles turn into excuses to police who belongs. And when you add racial bias into the mix, that Karen energy gets multiplied. There are stories all over the country of black homeowners being targeted by their HOAs, letters about too many guests, complaints about loud music when no one else is home, notes left on doors about improper use of property. It's all part of the same script. We don't trust you, we don't think you belong here, and we'll use every tool we have, including the police, to remind you. Another case, the pool incident. And if you think I'm exaggerating, let me bring up another story that mirrors Terrence. In 2018, in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, a black woman named Jasmine Edwards took her son to their neighborhood pool. She had her pool key. She lived in the community. But a white man, part of the HOA, confronted her. He demanded to see her ID. He told her she didn't belong. When she refused to let him intimidate her, guess what he did? Called the police. The cops showed up. Just like in Terrence's case, she had to stand there and prove she belonged in a place she had already paid to access. And when the truth came out, the man never apologized. Sound familiar? Because it's the same cycle: entitlement, suspicion, humiliation, silence. People sometimes ask, why do we make such a big deal out of these incidents? No one got hurt, right? But here's why. Because every time this happens, it chips away at a person's humanity. It teaches them that their word isn't enough, their presence isn't enough, that they have to prove over and over again that they belong. And think about the mental load of that. You can't just live freely when you're always calculating. If I walk here, will someone call the cops? If I open my garage, will someone think I'm stealing? If I bring guests over, will someone say it's too many? That constant awareness, that constant second-guessing, it's exhausting. And that's why these stories hit so deeply in black communities, because they're not just one-offs. They're reminders of a system that keeps repeating itself. So here's the next big question. What should have happened after? Should the officer have held Karen accountable for filing a false police report? Should the HOA have disciplined her for harassing a neighbor? Should there be consequences for people who use 911 as a weapon? Because right now, most of the time, nothing happens. The police leave, the neighbor sulks, and the victim is left carrying the weight. But imagine how different it would be if there were real consequences. Imagine if, every time someone made a false call, they had to pay a fine, face public accountability, or even lose their spot on the HOA board. Imagine how fast those suspicious neighbor calls would stop. And if you think HOAs are the only place this happens, think again. Because the same pattern has been playing out in workplaces, in schools, and even in stores. And wait until you hear what happened when Terrence went back to work and told his coworkers about the incident. Their reactions. Some were supportive, but others, let's just say, they revealed exactly why stories like his keep happening. Terrence at work, reactions that hurt. So Terrence goes to work the Monday after the incident. He tells a few coworkers about it, and at first some people are shocked. They say things like, "Wow, I can't believe she did that." They shake their heads, they sympathize. But then there's the other reaction, the one that cuts deep. A couple of coworkers laugh it off. "Man, that's just nosy neighbors, don't take it so personal." Another one even says, "Well, maybe she really thought someone was stealing. You can't blame her for being careful." That right there, that's the minimization that hurts as much as the event itself. Because when people excuse it, when they downplay it, It's like saying your pain isn't real. Like saying your humiliation was just a misunderstanding, not a symptom of something bigger. And that's the cycle Terrence found himself stuck in. Not just fighting his neighbor, but fighting the gaslighting of people who didn't want to admit what really happened. So where does that leave us? Part 1 showed us the confrontation, the moment of accusation, the police standing in the driveway, the truth coming out. But Part 2 shows us the deeper scars, the silence of neighbors, the humiliation at the HOA meeting, the weight of walking through a neighborhood that no longer feels like home. And that's why this story doesn't end with the cops leaving. It doesn't even end at the HOA. It lives on in the daily choices Terrence has to make. Do I speak up again? Do I fight back? Or do I just keep my head down and try to survive the whispers? That's the real impact of stories like this. They don't just last a day, they follow you. So here's the question I'll leave why. You with for Part 2? Do you think people who weaponize 911 like this should face real legal consequences? Or do you think social shame is enough? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know what you think. If you think this story matters, watch the next video. I promise it'll open your eyes even wider.